Hello, everyone. This is Ryan from Badgerland Birding, and today I am joined by the other half of Badgerland Birding, Derek, and then also our good friend Alex Harman, who has appeared on the show before. And we are here to talk about the definitive birding iceberg. For those of you that don't know what an iceberg is, it's essentially a topic that you can go from the very easy to understand stuff that everybody knows and dig down deep into the conspiracy and the niche of that topic. And it's been a trend going around the internet lately, so we decided to do one for birding.
So I think we're going to go through the top of it. So we name the categories different things. They're not necessarily your a such and such. If you're in this category, like there's a category called ornithologist. Doesn't mean you are an ornithologist, but it's like you're that level. So why don't we kick off our first category here? Birds are a thing. What does that mean, Ryan?
So this means that you are aware of birds. This is for the general population that is not a birder, but they do realize that birds exist. So that's people that have seen birds in cartoons, in media, have seen kind of the popular birds around or hanging out at their house. So the first one in our iceberg, did you see the eagles with the question mark? The reason this is on here is because if you're a birder and you've encountered non-birders and you tell them that you're birding, one of the first things they say is, did you see the eagle? Or I saw an eagle the other day. And part of this is because the eagle is an extremely noticeable bird. It's very large. It's America's national bird, so it's a symbol of freedom and our country. And then also, eagles came back from the brink of extinction, where they were on their way out because of DDT and a lot of other things contributing to their population decline, and then made a rebound with some of the acts put in place by the government. So they're a bird that people didn't used to see, and now even non-birders are aware of the bald eagle. Robins year round.
Robins used to be a sign of spring. So if you saw robins, you're like, oh, spring was coming. But now in a lot of places, we get robins year round. They'll be feeding on berries and things in the winter, and you'll see them. So they're not necessarily the sign of spring that they were, but to a lot of people, if they see robins, they always think that spring is coming.
Yeah, and a lot of states have the robin as their state bird too. So it's a bird that's very familiar to people, even if they're non-birders. Cardinals. Cardinals are one of the most popular birds in the United States. There's two professional sports teams named after cardinals, and also a lot of states have them as their state bird as well. They're a bird that's bright red, at least the males are. So when they come to feeders, they're very noticeable, and a lot of people see them. And there's also a long-held belief by some cultures and some people that a cardinal visiting you is essentially the spirit of a deceased relative or a sign of good luck. So they're a big time emblem in pop culture of kind of good things to come and potential spiritual ramifications.
Yeah, we always also get the either yellow cardinal or like half male, half female colored cardinal that goes viral in the news. And then, that's the talk of everybody's like, oh, did you see the cardinal? Which is cardinals are cool, but it's kind of a recurring thing that always happens.
Yeah, that's true. We've had a lot of cardinal variants and they always get passed around the internet and become a huge phenomenon. And as a
Yeah.
birder, then you get 10 people, sending you cardinal pictures like, have you seen this one? It's orange. Owls.
Owls are just another group of birds that are very popular to the general public. This is one type of bird that people who are totally not birders will go out of their way to go see, because owls are kind of mysterious. They are often out at night, so you don't really see them a whole lot. And overall, the general public just loves owls.
You also see this spill over into pop culture with, I remember how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop owl?
I remember that too. I was
Yeah,
thinking about that.
that's like one of the main pop culture things I think of when I think about owls. Also, they're just known as wise. People love to just kind of watch and observe them, and they're very captivating. So it's really easy to understand why. I think that's something that also kind of permeates the list. It's like I never get tired of hearing about owls or seeing owls or anything like that. It's a good kind of like thing that hooks you in.
Canada goose migration. Canada goose migration is something that is very noticeable, even if you're not a birder, because these massive numbers of Canada geese flock overhead as they go south and then back up north. So one of the first things that you notice in spring is this loud noise, and it's the Canada geese honking as they're flying in their V formation. So this is just another classic thing that a lot of people notice without even being birders, is that the Canada geese are migrating back. But also Canada geese are something that most people are annoyed by as well. So they'll always comment on the Canada geese getting in their way or stopping traffic or harassing them as they're trying to walk by. So
I
Canada
think
goose migration is something everyone knows.
The classic is that I think of as college students getting hissed at by geese, like on their lawn. Like, I was going to class and a Canada goose tried to eat me.
I was traumatized. Hunting.
I mean, hunting is just kind of, if you're a non-birder, you might be a hunter. You know, you go duck hunt, you hunt for snow geese. So that's a way that people are exposed to birds without actually like doing birding. Also, turkeys, kind of just stuff that's in the mainstream that people might be familiar with, even if you're not quote unquote a birder or someone who's specifically going out and looking to birds to see them. You might be going out to hunt them.
Window strikes.
Can we talk about how bad the Minnesota Vikings stadium is for bird strikes?
I have that listed. So window strikes are something that happens to birds because they don't realize that it's a window that is made of glass or some sort of reflective material, and they think they can just pass right through it. Or as they get spooked, they'll just ram into it without realizing it's there. And this causes a lot of deaths. And Derek, why don't you go on more about what you're talking about with the Vikings?
Yeah, so there's certain buildings that are just like bird killing machines. In the Minnesota Vikings, it's like a lot of glass, a lot of shiny material, so it ends up killing a lot of birds. But on the other hand, you have stadiums like the Milwaukee Bucks new stadium that's actually bird friendly. It uses different types of glass that it's easier for birds to see, so it helps reduce those deaths. And there's also little like things you can get to put on your windows. They're little like reflective things, so birds see them and they're less likely to hit the window. But it's been a huge problem. A lot of people, if you have bird feeders or anything, you might have a bird that hit your window. It might not have made it, or might have just sat there for a little bit and took off. You might have even like done a little rehab on it to make sure it's all right.
Yeah, one of the buildings on campus, an ornithology professor walks around it and records all the birds that he finds dead. I think he's recorded like 62 or 63 species just around this one building on campus because it's got the big glass windows and everything. But now they're starting to put in some reflective strips, so hopefully that reduces the number. But I found painted buntings, common yellowthroats, Lincoln sparrows, all sorts of dead birds outside of it.
Pigeons.
Pigeons are obviously a very noticeable bird. They're oftentimes one of the few birds that's really common in city centers, and they're just a really accessible bird for a lot of people around the world. And they're kind of cool too. As much as they are common and everywhere and eat trash, they have some nice metallic colors on them. They're fairly large.
I mean, also with pigeons, like one of the things I think about is they'll poop on your car. Like that's a lot of people's exposure to birds is they're like, birds pooped on my car.
You could do a deep dive, honestly, on a pigeon iceberg too. Like you could go carrier pigeons, you could go homing pigeons, you could go passenger pigeons, you could do a whole iceberg on pigeons, which I recommend Alex do in his free time.
Alrighty, next iceberg is going to be a pigeon iceberg.
Pigeonberg.
Pigeonberg. Next
it sounds
thing...
like the Hindenburg.
Game birds. Game birds are the birds that hunters know the most, and a lot of people by association because they're culturally significant. So talking about wild turkeys, which everybody's familiar with, grouse, ringneck pheasants, different species of ducks. So a lot of these birds are just very familiar to us because of the way that they're hunted and the way that they're seen as a food source. So most people, even if they're not birders, have heard of these things or had turkeys on Thanksgiving. So that is game birds. Angry birds.
Angry Birds was a very popular app where you could like swipe the birds out of a catapult and you had to kill the pigs or something like that.
I think you had to knock their house down or something.
Knock their house down, something like that. There were different types of birds. Some exploded on impact. Some were like boomerangs.
They have a commercial with Angry Birds now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically another example of birds in pop culture. Also kind of along with that, you had Flappy Bird. That was like a phenomenon for like a week or so. And that was another kind of bird-related game that everybody just kind of knew.
I'm pretty sure the creator decided that they wanted to get rid of Flappy Bird because he saw the negative impact it had on people mentally.
Well, it didn't last very long.
I think that's
it lasted like a couple of months, and then they got rid of it in the App Store, and people were selling like phones that had Flappy Bird on it for like thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Or something.
Hey, you want this phone? It's preloaded with Flappy Bird.
Roadrunner.
Going kind of along with our pop culture thing, just ways people are exposed to birds just kind of without even having to do anything. The Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. having their antics, as well as we had Donald Duck, and you could also add like Woodstock from Snoopy and Woodstock, just another little charismatic bird. Not necessarily with Woodstock really having a necessarily a specific species, but like the Roadrunner, it's cool that he's a specific bird. It made me more excited to go see a Roadrunner for the first time, having been exposed to it as a kid.
Birdhouse. Birdhouses are another thing that everybody knows about, even if they're not necessarily bird enthusiasts. They've probably seen them at people's properties or maybe even had some themselves. They're something that people use to adorn their home and sometimes just use them as a decorative type thing. So they make sports team specific birdhouses, holiday themed birdhouses, just as something to add a little decor. So something that's very popular with people. And we'll get into some more specific ones a little bit farther down the iceberg. Planet Earth.
Planet Earth is just a documentary series hosted by David Attenborough. And I mean, there's a lot of really good nature documentaries out there that show different birds and their habitat. You can see some great footage of different hummingbirds in the tropics. You can see like birds of paradise, penguins. So it's a really good way to get people able to see birds on their screen that they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to.
Can we get a David Attenborough impression?
Oh, I don't think I can pull that one off, but you're welcome to try.
Here we have the hummingbird, charismatic and beautiful.
Bird watcher. All right, we're moving on now to stage 2, which is bird watchers. These are people that are not actively birders, but they are spending some time paying attention to the birds. Bird feeders. Bird feeders are actually a $2 billion industry in the United States, or at least feeding birds is a $2 billion industry. You see some people that have just loads of bird feeders, like more bird feeders than I would ever think a human could actually fill. But I've seen some yards where rare birds have been reported, or even some friends' yards where they are just loaded with bird feeders. Binoculars.
Yeah, so I think at this stage, you're not just someone who kind of knows about birds, you're getting a little bit more involved, and a lot of people's first steps are getting a pair of binoculars so they can see birds a little better. People know me and Ryan as the weird people that don't use binoculars because we're just more camera birders, but that's a lot of people's first steps, like, hey, I bought a pair of binoculars, and then they can use them to look at birds.
Field guides.
A common thing when people start birding is that they'll find a bird at their feeder or wherever. They'll wonder what it is because it's something weird that they've never seen before. So to answer that question, what is this bird? They'll often buy a field guide. So they'll get their field guide, they can identify that bird. And as they're flipping through the field guide, they'll see a lot of other birds that they had no idea existed. So that's often what takes a person from just a casual, like, oh, I know birds exist, to an active birder is looking through that field guide, seeing all the cool birds that are found in their area, and then they try to look for them.
Yeah, one of the first field guides that we looked through was the Stand Tequila Birds of Wisconsin. It's like a little blue book. And it definitely doesn't cover everything, but it has like a lot of stuff in there. When I was young, you would just page through and be like, oh, I want to see one of these. And one of them was like the American coot. I was like, man, it'd be so cool to see a coot. And now actually going out and looking, there's coots everywhere. So it's funny how you can see something and be like, oh man, that'd be so cool to see one of those days, and then see like thousands at a different point in your life. But also when Ryan and I went out, we just said, oh, the map says this bird is supposed to be here in winter. And we would go out and be like, well, where is it? Like, why isn't it here? So there's definitely more to it than just a field guide map. But you got the Stand Tequila guides. We like the Stokes guides. There's also the Peterson guides. Sibley is a ton of people really like. So there's a variety of different
National Geographic is really good.
Yeah, so tons of different field guides available, and I feel like everybody actually has a different idea of which one is the best too. So it's kind of an interesting debate that people have. Bird art. of course, with anything that sparks interest, and especially something like a bird that people view as an object of freedom or a symbol of freedom because they can fly, there's going to be a lot of art about that specific topic, just like there is for birds. So a lot of artists out there are interested in drawing birds, painting birds. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. And then there's also art behind taking photographs as well. So birds in general get a lot of fanfare when it comes to art, especially some of the ones that are more popular, like the cardinals, the chickadees, the blue jays, things like that garner a lot of attention.
So that kind of made me curious. I just did a quick search for bird art. Apparently, there's a Van Gogh from 1886 called The Kingfisher.
Pet bird.
Anybody have a pet bird? We used to have parakeets.
We have a pet bird.
Yeah. Having a pet bird, it's just, you get deeper into it. Maybe you have one of your own. There's also YouTube channels where people just like have a parrot or an aracari or something. They're like, this is my aracari. And people are like, wow, it's amazing.
I didn't even know you could have those as pets.
I don't know if you can, but they do.
Oh, well. I know also there's some very specific pet birds that people have channels about too. Like I saw one with a lady who had a house sparrow as a pet that she raised from when it was a chick. And then I've seen a couple of starlings too. And I saw one guy who had a raven as a pet. And the first thing he said was, you should never want to have a raven as a pet. It was just like, it's a huge pain. You don't want this.
I feel like it would like open your door and stuff and just cause you trouble.
I feel like it would just prank you, like legitimately prank you, like move your stuff around.
Yeah, anything shiny that you leave out will just end up in like one corner of the house.
Where's my car keys?
Yeah, I mean, pet birds are getting a whole nother avenue of things that people are interested in. So pretty different from birding, actually, I would say, but the interest is still there for birds. So it's kind of akin in the same way. Bird tube. This is a moniker that describes YouTube specifically for birds and birding. There's a lot of different types actually to this. There's the people that focus on attracting birds to bird feeders, people that focus on just doing narration of different species, and then people that go out actually birding like us. And the good news is if you're watching this video, you have found BirdTube. So that's positive. Yeah, you did.
Welcome.
You got the bird tube, so congratulations. It's something that you could see blow up more in the future as more people get into birding and bird watching. So it's something to look forward to if you like what you see so far.
Yeah, some of the channels, Leslie the Bird Nerd's pretty big. We've done collaborations with her, Stefano, Ionaro. Then there's like Joe Alwood has narration videos. There's a lot of different stuff you guys may encounter on BirdTube. Also a lot of podcasts that also have their own YouTube show.
Turkey pardons. Turkey pardoning, actually, it's very debatable which president started the turkey pardoning. I've seen some articles say it was Abe Lincoln, whose son, I think it was, really liked a turkey that they had that they were going to have for Thanksgiving, and Abe Lincoln decided he was going to spare it. But I've also seen other presidents as being the ones allegedly responsible for starting the tradition. But yeah, basically now it's an official thing where a turkey gets pardoned and then is not eaten for Thanksgiving, and they make a big show of it. So it's kind of an interesting thing that our culture has adopted.
The Abe Lincoln story, that's the one that I've always been told.
A Birder's Guide to Everything. This was a movie in 2013 that was kind of a coming of age film and is also labeled as a comedy, but I didn't find it particularly funny. Okay. It's about a group of teenagers that are sort of in their coming of age phase where they're trying to figure themselves out, and they're also trying to find the extinct Labrador duck. Murmurations.
These are just giant groups of starlings, which are another introduced but fairly accessible bird. You can find them in cities. They can be found pretty much everywhere. But murmuration is a giant group of starlings, a flock that all fly together. And it just looks like a cloud that's like blowing in the wind, and they react like raptors flying over, and it just looks really cool. It almost looks like smoke at a distance. And it's another easy, impressive bird phenomena to see just kind of anywhere in the world where starlings are found.
Feeding chickadees.
Feeding chickadees, how can you not love those little chickadees that show up, make the different calls, come in, steal a seed, and take off?
Yeah, but feeding chickadees has a very interesting caveat that we actually did a video on, which is that chickadees are so naturally curious that they'll actually come land on your hand and eat food out of your hand, which is kind of interesting. So that's a species that you can actually interact with in a different way than a lot of the other birds you feed. Not to say that you should go out there trying to feed every chickadee, because you don't want to have a negative impact on those particular birds, but there are some places where over time they've developed an association with people with food, so they'll come do it, and you're not really doing anything harmful to them if that's already a situation that's developed. Orioles and hummingbirds.
Bright orange black birds, Baltimore Orioles, named for them, the team. Hummingbirds, people love setting up their hummingbird feeders, getting their first species. In Louisiana, we even have like a winter hummingbird season.
Bird enthusiast. We're moving on to stage 3, which is bird enthusiasts. So you're starting to get more involved now into the deeper portion of the iceberg. So there's going to be some potentially interesting things here that you may not have heard about before. Starling introduction.
There was a society of people in New York whose goal it was to introduce every bird found in the works of Shakespeare into North America, because they thought it would be cool. They thought our birds weren't good enough. I don't know the exact reasoning on that. But one of the birds that Shakespeare mentioned in one of his plays or something was a starling. So they brought European starlings over and tried to introduce them a few different times. And I think the first couple times they were unsuccessful, but eventually they stuck and they spread all throughout North America, as far as I'm aware. But I would be very interested in the details.
Yeah, a lot of different societies called acclimatization societies popped up in the United States to try to bring stuff from the old world to the new world. And a lot of the reason was to either eat pests that they viewed as problematic for crops, or just to be appealing to the European settlers, because this was in the midst of a huge migrant boom with tons of people coming over from Europe and the old world. So there was a guy named Eugene Schieffelin who was very interested in this kind of thing, and he imported a lot of birds, including house sparrows, skylarks, and other stuff, including the European starling too. So a lot of historians credit this guy specifically with the introduction of the European starling. So he was instrumental in getting this species to the United States. So it's kind of an interesting backstory with the starling. Ivory-billed woodpecker.
Some people do believe the ivory-billed woodpecker is still around. There was a paper in the 2000s about the rediscovery. I forgot the exact year, but it was the Cornell team went out and they got call recordings, and they had this video called the Leno video that they said was of an ivory-billed woodpecker. Later, people said, no, that's not an ivory-billed woodpecker. It's a similar looking pileated woodpecker. Caused this huge controversy. So people still go out and have sightings. People still go look, but a lot of those sightings are questioned by people. The birds live in these dense southern areas that are hard to get to. So it's hard to say if they're still around or not, but it's a very, very polarizing topic for a lot of people.
Bird gardens.
I mean, this is just kind of an extension of what we talked about before with the bird houses, just making your yard a full out bird zone. People are planting specific plants to attract more species. People installing a water feature, making their own like little bird pond. You can make it as crazy as you want to make it.
Yeah, and a lot of this is native planting too. So planting things that are going to produce seeds that birds are going to like, cover for birds, specific plants for specific species. Some people go really crazy, not in a bad way, just really crazy with making the yard bird friendly. So that's something that you see more and more as people kind of get into the birding type thing. Playback controversy. Playback controversy is an issue where one side of the debate believes that it's okay to play calls of birds anytime to lure them in, and that it has no negative effect. Some side of the debate say that it's okay sometimes but not other times, so you shouldn't do it when birds are nesting, and some people say you shouldn't do it at all. So this controversy is a common thread throughout a lot of different events that happen in the birding world, and you'll see it from time to time with owls, with different species of songbirds, where people get kind of upset about how people are handling the playback. John James Audubon.
So basically, John James Audubon is a really huge figure in the birding community. He was involved with sketching and getting specimens of a lot of these early on species, and a lot of things are named after him, like the National Audubon Society, Audubon's warbler. So just a really prominent figure. And if you're at this stage, you're going to start learning about more of those big names in birding who are historical figures.
The Big Year Movie. The Big Year is a movie that was released in 2011 and is responsible for sparking a lot of people with birding and was an introduction to a lot of people that birding was a thing, myself included. And it's a movie that has Jack Black and it has Owen Wilson and Steve Martin. And it's technically a comedy, but a lot of it is just like a really heartfelt movie about three people competing to do a big year, and it goes through their entire year and some of the crazy things they do to find birds. It didn't actually get fantastic results at the box office because, in my opinion, they marketed it as a slapstick comedy, which it was more of a heartfelt comedy. It was more light than what they marketed it as. So it didn't get great reviews, but it was a really important movie for a lot of people and introduced a lot of people to the hobby of birding. Birds aren't real.
There's been a meme going around on the internet saying birds are government drones and they aren't real. And if you are a birder or a bird enthusiast in this case, you will eventually have some Facebook friend who sends you a meme saying that birds are not real. You kind of just have to laugh along with it and deal with it. I don't
Or
think,
you have to acknowledge that it's a true conspiracy.
yeah, or acknowledge that it's a true conspiracy and all these birds that you're looking at and chasing are actually government drones, whichever way you want to take that.
I mean, the birds work for the bourgeoisie.
Roosting owls. This is something that I'm sure happens in every single state and every single country, but it just recently happened in Wisconsin where a owl roost by either a single owl or a group of owls gets discovered, and then the location gets shared and a bunch of people, birders and photographers, go to the area to get pictures and views of these owls. And what happens is just a stampede of people end up going, and then a lot of people get upset about it. A lot of people don't know the location, but a bunch of people do. And it turns into this weird situation where it's like one of the worst kept secrets in the birding community. And it's constantly creating issues to the point where people don't then e-bird their sightings and don't share any information about where they find sensitive species.
Yeah, and the big issue is if the owls get disturbed too much, it'll stress them out. They won't eat as much, or they'll just leave.
Hunting cranes.
Some issue of controversy has been the idea is if we should allow people to hunt sandhill cranes or not. A while back, sandhill cranes were in real decline. If you read Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac, he talks about hearing the sandhill cranes, and there was a lot of worry about them going extinct and people not hearing them ever again. And so a lot of birders now who are older, they get really excited to see sandhill cranes because they were in decline for so long. And so it's a very kind of big bird that almost you can think it's a deer if you see a group of them in a field. You're like, what are those? Are those deer? And then you're like, oh, they're cranes. But there's been this idea that, oh, their population's stable. Should we allow people to hunt them? They've had the nickname ribeye in the sky. I've never tried one, so I couldn't tell you if that's true or not. If anyone's tasted a sandhill crane, let me know in the comments if it was any good. But there's this controversy about should we allow hunting of them or not? I'm more on the side of not.
Hunting them is legal in Oklahoma, where I am.
He's tasted them, I can tell.
It's putting a lot of trust in hunters to correctly distinguish between sandhill cranes and the federally endangered protected whooping cranes, which they don't look that much alike. You think it would be pretty easy, but just this year, Oklahoma hunters accidentally shot and killed 2 whooping cranes.
Wow.
So, yeah, trusting folks to correctly identify their cranes before shooting them is apparently a little too much to ask sometimes.
And 2 whooping cranes may not sound like much, but with the limited numbers of that species, that's actually a sizable percentage of their population. Great Potoo.
The Potoos, they're these birds that if you want to go like simple, you can call them stick birds because during the day, they basically just stay as still as possible and they'll pretend to be a stick. So I've seen the common Potoo, but not the great. But there's some images of great Potoos where they look very alien and very creepy to the point where it's become kind of this viral meme that goes around and people are like, what is this thing? Does it exist? And so like the one that I saw was just pretending to be a stick. So it just had its head up like this. And it made for a really boring video because it looks like a picture because it's just not moving at all, but really amazing camouflage. But the kind of the creepiness of when they're like eyes are showing and when they're like open in their mouth, and they got some really alien-like calls, kind of made it like a viral thing that got to more of the general public than other birds do. So a lot of people were kind of creeped out by that and, you know, led them to dive deeper into birds and weird birds.
Lifers.
A lifer is any bird that you are seeing for the first time in your life. So if I had never seen a great Potoo before, which I haven't, if I eventually go down to Central America and see a great Potoo, that great Potoo, the first one I saw, will be my lifer. Some people will expand on this, and when they see a first bird for their state, that will be a state lifer for them. But usually a lifer is just the first time you've ever seen that bird species in your life.
And that will also be the last time because that bird will eat you.
If it is a great Potoo, yes.
Feral cats. The feral cat controversy is the difference in the contingencies between people that let their cats outside and the people that realize that feral cats kill an enormous number of birds every single year. So feral cats do a lot of damage to a variety of bird populations, and there's a constant struggle between people trying to convince cat owners to leave their cats inside and cat owners wanting their cats to be outside roaming around. There's also been talk about culling feral cats. So actual efforts to destroy the cats that are outside.
Which gets very controversial.
So
Absolutely.
the American Bird Conservancy says in the United States alone, outdoor cats kill approximately 2.4 billion birds every year.
Cameras.
People want to start taking pictures of the birds they see so they can get some kind of camera. And this kind of evolves the more you get into birding. Some people end up with these enormous lenses that it's hard to even like pick up and lift. Some people dress in camo and they stake out the forest and they just sit there with their huge lens for hours. So this is kind of an evolving thing throughout the chart.
Merlin.
Merlin is a great app that is put out by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that also does eBird and a whole lot of other birding related stuff. And you can download packs of birds that are specific to your general area. So for me in Oklahoma, they have a pack that's Oklahoma and Texas. And then it has the whole list of birds that are commonly found in your area. It has pictures, it has ID information, and it has range maps showing where they're found and calls, so you know what they're supposed to sound like. Another way to use the app is they have a photo recognition feature, so you can submit a photo and say where you found it, and it'll give you an ID for that, and that works somewhat well, but the results can be varied. So you see some people submitting a picture of a starling and they'll be like, what is this? Merlin told me it was a crested caracara, which is not found around here, or something like that, because they didn't input the location correctly or some sort of issue. So
yeah, I think Merlin's gotten a lot better. They also have the sound ID feature. So you can pull out your phone, record the sounds around you, isolate it, and it'll try to tell you what bird it's from. So that's a really unique thing they've been working on too. But with the photo ID, I think it's gotten a lot better. If you can give it a good picture in a good location, it normally does a pretty good job. But when I was in Costa Rica, using Merlin was nice because all the species are updated. There's been a couple things that they've split or lumped. And so the field guide I was using was actually a little bit out of date. So it's nice to have Merlin with all the updated information to tell me if species were split or lumped and give a little more specific type.
Bird talk.
Basically, the idea of bird talk is just bird information on TikTok. It's more short form content, so a lot of younger people are on there. And there's photographers, people just talking about bird information, but it's kind of like similar to BirdTube. Maybe you're on BirdTube and Bird Talk.
Birder. This is the stage where you're still digging down deeper in kind of the middle range of the iceberg. You're starting to understand more about birds at this stage, but you are not nearly in the conspiracy and niche section yet. Foy and Foff. Foy and Foff, which stand for first of year and first of fall. This is representative of the first time of a year that you see a particular species or the first time of fall. So sometimes when the birds migrate back, you can count the first one that you see in that individual season. And a lot of people put this especially on reports or listserv things where it's just, this is my foy, this is my foff. Scope.
A spotting scope is sort of the next step up after you have binoculars, after you have a camera. The spotting scope is kind of the third piece of equipment that birders often use out in the field. So it is kind of like a telescope, only it has an extra mirror in it, so everything is right side up, because if you just used a telescope to look at birds, everything would be upside down. I tried it before I got a spotting scope. It's not great to work with.
How long did you actually bring it out and look and you're like, ah, dang it?
Yeah, I had a telescope, brought it out, had it sitting at my lake full of ducks, and yeah, everything was upside down. It was not in great focus. It was a bad time all around. Um, but a spotting scope is pretty heavy and difficult to lug around for the most part. It takes up a lot more space than binoculars. So it's kind of more specialized for really long distance birding. So hawk watching, looking out into the ocean to try and find seabirds, looking at groups of ducks or gulls at a distant landfill or lake. That's for the most part what I use my scope for.
eBird.
The idea behind eBird is you can put your bird sightings in, so you can make a checklist. It says, was I traveling? Was I stationary? What was the date? How many miles did I walk? What was the time? And then you say, I saw this many of this species, this many of this species, this many of this species. Sometimes it'll mark something as rare. If it's not often seen there, you can add photos and it keeps track of all the data for you. So what I really love about eBird is it keeps track of where you saw birds in like a specific county, a specific state, and it's very easy to keep track of numbers. You can see when was the first time I saw a species. You can look up reports of where other birds have been seen. You can see maps for other things people have submitted. You can see photos. It's just an all-around great resource.
Listers. Listers are people that like to keep track of the species that they've seen. At a certain level, pretty much every birder that you meet will also be a lister and keep track of their life list, their county list, and we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But listers are essentially people that are keeping track of the number of birds that they've seen and the specific species that they've seen. ABA. ABA stands for American Birding Association, and it's technically a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1968, and Wikipedia says it's dedicated to recreational birding in Canada and the United States.
Well, they also have codes for rarities. So like in the big year, you'll hear like, oh, that's code 5. So that means it's really rare. I think, is it 0 through 5? Probably not 0.
I think it's 1 through 5.
1 through 5. So like 1 is not that rare. 5 is super rare. So you also have those ABA codes too.
And they also define the ABA area, which is the region in which these birds are either rare or common. So the ABA area back in the day was like the United States, Canada, Baja California, and I think 1 or 2 of the Caribbean islands that the United States owns. And then we got rid of Baja California and the Caribbean islands. It was just continental US and Canada. And then recently they've added in Hawaii, which has produced some controversy because the bird fauna there is so much different than the rest of North America. But it looks like Hawaii is here to stay. And who knows, maybe they'll add some other areas in the near future too.
Passenger pigeon.
Yeah, this one we touched on earlier, but that's kind of the flagship species for extinction. They used to be super abundant in the United States, but they just got basically hunted to death. There were so many of them. There were stories about flocks flying overhead for hours, which I can't even fathom what that would be like. But yeah, they were shot, habitats were destroyed, and they're extinct now. Martha, I believe, was the name of the last one, died. And they no longer exist. So it's kind of a story of caution of remember the passenger pigeon. Let's not let that happen to any other species.
iNaturalist.
So iNaturalist is an amazing app, kind of like eBird, where you can submit sightings of organisms. Main differences from eBird is you need to take either a photo or a sound recording of it or a video, I think, and you submit it to the app, and then to get it research grade, someone else needs to confirm it. So unlike eBird, where you can just say, hey, I saw 3 juncos in my yard, here you need someone to confirm that the birds in your picture are actually juncos for it to be counted. Additionally, it's for all organisms. So anything from plants, fungi, insects, birds. You can submit any sort of living organism to iNaturalist. A lot of high schoolers that are using it for the first time even submit photos of themselves, which not really the purpose, but okay. The other thing that's great is iNaturalist geotags all of your photos automatically when you take them, so you know the exact GPS coordinates of the organism you saw. And it's just a really amazing app for citizen science and keeping track of what you've seen.
So I still feel like eBird is a lot better for birds. How do you feel about that, Alex?
I would agree with that just because of some of the other features eBird has. So eBird, you can make target lists for various areas. What are the birds you're most likely to see that you've never seen before? It is easier to keep track of your life list and regional lists than on iNaturalist. So I use eBird for all of my birding related things, and then I submit everything else onto iNaturalist. So all my insects, beetles, grasshoppers, I use iNaturalist to keep track of where I collect grasshoppers for my research, because I can just take the GPS coordinates right out there in the field. So they serve different purposes for me, but they're both great websites.
Well, I also want to mention Xenocanto is another one for calls. It's kind of like a call library, I think. Don't know a ton about that one, but it's kind of another one that I've heard people use.
Pishing. Pishing is making noise to entice birds to either come out or elicit a reaction from birds. Usually this is used with wrens. I've seen it used for finches and chickadees as well. It's a noise that just kind of gets the birds excited enough to come out in the open, or maybe try to chastise you when they see that you're not another bird.
When I first heard this, I didn't really know what it was until I heard somebody do it. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of what it is. So this is mine. And then I'll throw out a long one. Sometimes I'll go.
I like how you got like the hand up here, like as if you're gonna rap. Yeah.
They like that
Rap
too.
battle, but instead of fishing battle, and whoever attracts the most sparrows wins.
So it's a real pishing contest.
They have epic rap battles of history. We have epic rap battles of chickadees.
Epic pish battles of chickadees. Do you find it's better if you just spit a lot when you pish?
You got to do yours. We haven't gone around yet.
You ready?
Yep.
Oh, average?
So I do kind of two different things. So there's the normal like, but then also I was listening to the ABA's podcast, and apparently different pitching is supposed to work better in different areas based on like what your dominant titmouse or chickadee is. So titmice often do a pitching noise that's like, so that's what I do a lot here in Oklahoma.
Is that the We Will Rock You?
I guess.
I didn't think we were gonna get this into pishing.
I know a guy who he does like a thing with his hand where he makes like mouse sounds, like he makes like that kind of noise, and that sometimes bring birds in. There's also like the little, Ryan got me like a little bird call you spin around and it makes kind of squeaking noises too.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel.
Squeaky wheel against the birds.
Yeah, exactly. But basically it's just a way of getting birds to come out. I do remember the first time I saw someone do this, because when I heard what pishing was, you know, I had a weak pish. I was just like, psh, psh, psh. I was like, how come it doesn't work? And then I saw someone do it and they were just aggressive with the pishing. They're just like, psh, psh. I was like, oh, okay, that's how you do it.
I tend to get more aggressive the longer I'm standing there without seeing the bird. Also, word of warning to people in the audience, pishing only works if no one else is around. So the second you try to show pishing to someone else, no birds will show up, and you'll just look like an idiot standing there going at a bush.
You definitely don't sound like someone who's had personal experience with that.
Yeah, definitely not.
I can just picture Alex like pishing, and then just a bunch of people walk by and they're just like, well, there's our local idiot.
I picture going where he's pishing and then a bird comes and hits the window. And then it's just like, not again.
County big year.
So the idea behind a big year is that you're trying to find as many species as possible. Like if you do a global big year, like in the movie The Big Year, it's in the ABA area. But you can do a county big year. So if you live in a specific county, you're just trying to see as many birds as possible in that county. And what's nice about eBird is you can set alerts. So it'll send you what birds have been reported that you haven't seen, and you can set it for a specific county. So you can, if you want to go kind of local, you can do a county big year.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the first big year steps. So if you don't want to go huge and do an ABA big year or a state big year, then county big year is a good option to kind of get the feel of a big year. Next up, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that another thing eBird does is it has a top 100 list for all regional levels, country, state, county too. So that adds in a fun little competitive aspect of it, as you can see where everyone else in your county is compared to you for the year and see how your ranking is and everything.
Wood duck box.
Just like regular bird houses, wood duck boxes are used to attract wood ducks to nest in them. Since wood ducks are cavity nesters and their young actually jump out of the cavities that are usually in trees, wood duck boxes have to be located in certain places near water and certain heights off the ground with certain requirements for the diameter of the hole that the wood ducks are going to be going into. So this is the next level of the birdhouse idea, attracting a specific species in the wood duck. And there's also other bird species that use these boxes too. So sometimes screech owls will nest in wood duck boxes, and you'll see them in marshy areas where people are putting them up to attract that particular species.
Yeah, you also have kestrel boxes that have different specifications, as well as bluebird boxes too.
Cornell Lab of Ornithology.
So the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is just one of the primary bird-related ornithology labs in the country. So Cornell Lab of Ornithology has really integrated itself into birding in general. They're the ones who run eBird. They're the ones who produce the Merlin app. They've also gotten themselves into some of the controversies, like the ivory-billed woodpecker controversy was very involved with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology.
Wingspan.
This is Wingspan, which is a bird-related board game. Give yourself an hour to read over the directions before playing it, because it is pretty complex to figure out. But once you've got it, it's a really fun game. And I know a lot of birders who this is how they introduce birding to their family. And it's a really good game for getting people familiar with their local birds. It's based around US birds, but there have since been expansion packs for the Eurasian region and the Oceania region. So you can just play with a whole lot of birds, and it's a really fun game.
Woodcocking.
So I think this was something cool that Ryan and I got to do kind of our first year. We learned about the American woodcock. And they're very unique because they will do this mating dance where in the spring, at least where we are in Wisconsin, they'll start to come in and they'll make this call called a peent, where it kind of is it looks like it moves their whole body, and then they'll do these circle flights where you can hear their wings, and then they'll come down in a similar area. So it happens right as it's starting to get dark, and it's just kind of a specific bird event to go to where you see the woodcocks doing their peent and their flight display.
Snipe hunting.
Snipe hunting we put down because in the movie Up, they're talking about hunting a bird called a snipe, which in this instance was supposed to be a mythical bird that didn't exist. And it's kind of a way to send someone on a wild goose chase to say that they'll go on a snipe hunt. But in reality, the snipe is a real bird. There's a Wilson snipe and a common snipe that I know of. There could even be more. But they're a bird that looks actually very similar to a woodcock, but is usually found more in marshy habitats and wetlands, as opposed to where the woodcock are found more in wooded areas.
Old squaw.
Old squaw is a name given to a bird that is now called the long-tailed duck, and it's one of many bird names that were used in older times or just previous times when birds got renamed. So this one is one of them, the old squaw. Another one is gray jay for the bird that is now commonly referred to as Canada jay. Can you guys think of some other ones?
McCown's or McCoon's longspur is now thick-billed longspur. There have been a few that have changed. Some of it is taxonomic. So how Derek was saying when he went to Costa Rica, some of the birds in the field guide are not the birds that he was seeing anymore. Like Passerinis and scarlet-rumped tanager were found to be the same species, so they lumped them back, and now they're both scarlet-rumped tanager. Some of them are more removing names that were considered insensitive or otherwise marginalizing to a group of people, and that's why they got rid of them and changed them to a more descriptive name.
Bird spottingopoly.
This is another board game, sort of like Wingspan, but it's another take on the common game Monopoly. I actually have it right here. So this is Bird Spotting Monopoly.
It's called Bird Spottingopoly, Rick.
Well, it's Bird Spotting Monopoly.
Facebook groups.
Once you're into birding, you'll realize there's a lot of different Facebook groups for stuff. There's local ones, there's national ones, there's identification ones. So it's a place where you can post your photos, sightings, hear about other people's sightings. connect with bird people. A lot of these groups end up having different rules because certain things go awry. Like photographers post too many photos all the time, so they'll have restrictions on how often you can post. They'll ban people. It can kind of turn into a little bit of a drama, but they exist, and I think they're useful.
I think they're really useful because a lot of sightings now get shared through Facebook groups. So you have rare bird alerts, you'll have just general state birding groups, you have ABA birding groups. It's really all across the board, and they definitely are useful. Like you said, they can be dramatic from time to time just because whenever a big group of people is together, there can be drama. But I think by and large, they're a useful thing for birders.
Chaser.
We're on to stage 5, which is chaser. So another stage deeper in the iceberg. Chaser is somebody that's more interested in going after rare birds, somebody that's taking longer trips to see birds. They're actively seeking out reports of birds that have been sighted. So this is the next stage down.
Birds versus fish.
Yeah, so this was a Twitter thing. I think it's more in kind of the academic community, but there was like a birds versus fish debate on like what's better, birds or fish. And then you have people showing osprey eating fish, being like birds are better. And then you have somebody showing a Wells catfish eating a pigeon, being like team fish. So it kind of was like this polarizing thing that was more just for fun. But it's still kind of an ongoing debate. There's even stickers that are like hashtag team fish, hashtag team bird, birds versus fish. So it's just kind of a funny, fun little competition.
Bird call training.
So when you're a birder, you will get used to the idea that you need to not only know what the birds look like, but know what they sound like in order to identify them, especially as the leaves grow out on the trees and you don't get to see the birds as much or only get glimpses of them, especially warblers. It really helps to know their call in order to know which species are around. So bird call training is something that people will do where they'll actually play a CD or something like that in their car that has the bird call and then says what bird species it is, and then also sometimes describes a mnemonic device on how to remember it. So this is something that people do when they're kind of trying to learn their bird calls.
Which I think we need to go around and say some of our favorite mnemonic devices. One of the ones I remember is indigo bunting is fire, fire, where, here, here.
I like the Bell's Vireo, cheetle, cheetle, chee, cheetle, cheetle, chew.
I like how with the black-capped chickadees, their like song sounds like they're saying cheeseburger. At least someone said that to me once, and I can't unhear it. So
yeah, so there's different mnemonic devices, and then at this stage, you might actually specifically try to learn different calls. Like if I'm looking for a target bird, I'll normally try to at least know partially what the song kind of sounds like or have it on hand so I can listen to it. Also, some of the songs you're just going to learn naturally. Like I think Song Sparrow was one of the first ones I learned because I just kept hearing it.
Well, you chase it down and then you see it make the call.
Yeah,
and you remember
and
how
some
you
will
had
just
to chase it down.
drive you mad because it'll be the same thing, and you'll be like, "What is that?" And then you'll see it and like, "Oh, it's this." That I always wonder what it is every time.
Gatekeeping.
There's been like specific instances where a rare bird gets reported, and then either they won't let people come in, or they'll like decide only certain people can come see it, or that they'll just tell their friends they can come see it. Where if it's on private property, there's some degree of, they are able to say, I want visitors or not, and you should respect what they say. But it gets tough because there was an instance where there was a rare bird reported where they tried to decide, oh, we're taking like, did they say like the top 10 bird?
It was just like a certain number based on criteria that no one really understood.
Yeah, so like only certain people got to go see that bird, and then it was like off limits. But it's also annoying when people will post a rare bird and then they say, but nobody can come see it. Like I found it on private property, no one can look. So
or they'll post it after the fact too. So like 2 weeks later, it's like, oh, I had this code 5 at my bird feeder, and now that it's gone, here it is. But it is understandable to a degree because when a rare bird gets reported, birders can sometimes be a little nuts with
sometimes people just show up at people's houses. They're like, hey, I'm here to see this. You're like, how'd you get this address?
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, for a rare bird or a sensitive species, you can't have everybody going, but at the same time, it's kind of like, oh man, I wish that I could have known or been able to go see
But I
that.
will say there've been some amazing hosts that will be like, yeah, everyone's invited. Pam with the Allen's Hummingbird, she like invited everybody to come see it. there are people that will make like super stew for people that come and see it. So it really varies by person.
Yeah, it's been all over the place. But gatekeeping is something that happens in the birding community from time to time.
Bird clubs.
These are things that popped up all throughout the United States in different communities, and it used to be all in-person stuff before the digital age. So it would be a group of people that would meet X amount of times a week or a month, and they would go birding and report sightings and talk about birding events in the community. And now that it's more of the digital age, these are happening over Zoom too. So a lot of people in these bird clubs are finding new ways to interact and have guest speakers and things like that. So these are all over the country. I guarantee there's one somewhere near your community. If you're in a city, if you're out in the country, there's probably one somewhat close-ish. But you can probably find them online as well and be part of a bird club, which is cool to be a member with a bunch of other like-minded people.
Twitching.
Twitchers are birders that kind of go out of their way to chase every rarity in a specific region or something like that. I think the term came like from Europe or Australia, and it's kind of spread here a little bit.
First of year birding challenge.
This is a thing that we do every single year that other people do as well. So we can't take credit for being the first, but we may have been one of the first to label it and put it on YouTube. But it's trying to go out on the first of the year and see as many species as possible. And it kind of stems from the idea that every year is a new year and people are doing a big year and you want to get a good head start. So we'll usually try to see the rarest bird possible and other rare birds along the way and collect as many species as possible on the first of the year.
And then it makes it exciting to see the birds that you kind of see every day. Like on the first year, like, oh, a house sparrow. And then for the rest of you, they're like, house sparrows. But for that one moment, it's exciting.
The other thing I see a lot too is people will always try and get a good first bird of the year. So a lot of people will go out at midnight to try and find an eastern screech owl or a great horned owl as their first bird of the year. And I don't know about you guys, but I mostly end up with starlings as my first of the year bird. This year it was actually Canada goose. So happy it was something native.
Birdcation.
So birdcations are taking bird-specific vacations. We kind of joke about like if you force your significant other to go with you on a birdcation if they're not birding. In the big year, it's really depicted well. The guy takes his wife on a honeymoon to Attu, Alaska, which is, a pretty intense place to go. But it's just basically taking bird-specific vacations. Like when I went to Costa Rica, it wasn't specifically for birding, but I did a ton of birding. But like I would definitely go for a birdcation and just go to try to see as many birds as possible.
I think.
Have you taken birdcations, Alex?
I've taken trips that could be kind of called birdcations. I likewise went on a ecology course to Costa Rica, so I think I saw 254 bird species when I was down there or something like that. So put up a pretty decent list. What I tend to do is I alter vacations as need be to get a couple birds here and there. So instead of going to
Sounds
this
a little
beach,
shifty.
instead of going to this beach for the day, we go to this one a couple miles away where a piping plover has been seen.
It's actually like a mud flat or an ag field. And you're like, we're going to go to the beach.
State big year.
A state big year is the concept of a big year, but done within a particular state. So this is pretty much United States specific, but you could do it in other countries if they're parceled out, or like Canada has provinces, you could do a province big year. But this is essentially a big year within that specific area within your state lines. And I feel like when you're a birder, you eventually get to this point where you want to do some kind of big year. It's like when you're really eager to see everything and excited about the new species that are out there. And it usually, I think, happens kind of early in your birding career from what I've noticed from people is they find birding, get excited about it, do kind of a state big year as opposed to like an ABA big year or a county big year. And then they kind of go back to more casual after that, I guess I would say, or they go more niche after that. So that's a state big year.
Feeder stakeout.
The idea of a feeder stakeout is just if there's a rare bird reported, you'll like either talk to someone and go to their bird feeder, or go to a location where there's bird feeders and wait for a rarity to show up. So it's kind of similar to chasing, just the idea of like waiting for a specific bird. We've done this with like Harris's sparrows, evening grosbeaks, a variety of different stuff.
I like feeder stakeouts. Some people hate feeder stakeouts, but knowing that the bird has a centralized place that's been coming to makes it kind of fun.
Well, it's nice to just set up your tripod and just wait.
Or sit in your car and wait like a creep.
Steller's sea eagle.
That's been this phenomenon where there's been a rare stellar seagull that's just kind of been making its way all over the U.S. So it's piqued a lot of people's interest. Really spectacular bird. So a lot of news articles about it, and it's been going to a lot of different states.
Don't people speculate it's literally one bird?
There's a lot of debate, but that's currently what a lot of people who have looked at it and compared the plumage and feather placement and everything, they're thinking that the one in the Northeast is almost certainly the same as one in Alaska from last spring. But no one had an in-flight photo of the one in Texas. So
maybe they should just
really
ban
don't
it.
know. Yeah.
Good luck catching that thing.
Big year discrepancies.
This is in reference to the fact that while The Big Year, in my opinion, is a really good movie, there are some things that absolutely drive me nuts about it, and I'm sure other birders as well, because there are some mistakes in it, such as on the first day of the year, one of the characters played by Jack Black looks out the window and it counts one bird species when it looks over a flock of gulls, and there are multiple bird species there. And there are some other things too, including what seems to be them calling a indigo bunting a blue grosbeak.
Another thing is Bostic, one of the main characters, he's looking for a snowy owl. For a long time, it's kind of his like nemesis bird, which is what is, bird he has been eluding you. But that's something where he should be able to get that pretty easily. Like it's likely that that's not going to be a nemesis bird for that long.
When you see the sandhill crane that they get for the first time in their big year, and it's like bird number 400 for them. Like you could not bird the entire US and not get a sandhill crane before like bird number 200 probably.
Probably even if you're trying, you couldn't avoid.
Yeah,
getting a
you'd have
sandhill
to
crane.
actively avoid them and somehow like wear earplugs, don't hear the sandhill cranes.
Arctic gulls.
There's a set of gulls that live in the Arctic, way high up in the Arctic. In fact, so high that scientists aren't even able to study them very well. And some of these include ivory gull and Ross's gull. And occasionally these birds come into the lower 48 states and usually cause quite a stir in the birding community they're in. And Wisconsin this year has actually gotten a Ross's gull and an ivory gull. But then something that's worth noting about these birds is they do not survive well outside of the Arctic. So a lot of times when they come down here, they'll survive for a little while, and even if they seem healthy, they'll eventually end up found deceased. This was the case with a Ross's gull that we went chasing this year, me and Bill, and we were the ones that unfortunately found it deceased. But these birds are really popular, and they're the gold standard for gulls that people want to see in North America typically.
Stringing.
Stringing is what it's generally called when someone posts or says they saw a bird that they did not actually see. And it can have a couple of meanings and reasons behind it. A lot of times people, when they first start out birding, don't really know what's common for their area. So they'll see a bird, they'll find something that looks like it in a field guide, and they'll say they saw it. Sometimes not looking at a range map or not realizing it shouldn't be there. That's the tolerable kind of stringing as people learn their way around birds. The bad kind is when someone just kind of makes up birds for clout or for, I don't even know why, just to get attention, to seem like a better birder.
Just to get their list up, their list
Yeah,
total.
get the list up, whatever. And we'll have some specific case studies of this later in the Iceberg. But that's all I'm going to say for now.
Well, what's always weird to me is when on eBird you see a report from someone that always has their camera with them and they have pictures of everything. And then in this report, it's like, got clear views of this bird from 50 feet away for 10 minutes, and there's no picture. It's like, got clear views of it, saw it, great. This is absolutely what it was, no picture.
Listservs.
A listserv is basically just an email group you sign up for. Like there's a Wisconsin birding one. So you can go to the website, put your email in. People will send an email to the listserv and then you'll get the information. So it'll have topic like, I don't know, ivory gull still present 10 a.m. And it'll say like the ivory gull was still here at this location as of this day. Or people will ask questions like, has anyone seen this bird? Or they'll just put their report. So it's a good way to get information.
Our Wisconsin listserv almost died, and then people brought it back to life. because they decided that with all the new technology, Facebook groups and different things like that, they were going to get rid of it, and people liked it and decided they wanted to save it, so it still exists.
I like it.
I like it too. Nothing better than seeing that email pop up telling you that the Ross's gull is deceased.
You need a moment? Do you want us to come back to you?